Hi guys, Jared Dennison. Obviously you've been getting my emails. I appreciate you checking this video out. I just wanted to open up my life a little bit more on the personal side instead of talking about real estate all the time. So today we're going to talk about a topic that at least is interesting to me, and I hope by the end you're halfway interested as well. That is Dungeons and Dragons. Today I'm going to show you some of the things that you need to know about playing the game. I'm also going to show you some of the tips and tricks that I use personally when I'm playing or when I'm a DM, which is a dungeon master. And then we're also going to look at some of the more expensive ways to play and the cheap ways to play for those that are just getting started. When you're playing this Dungeons and Dragons game, there's one key component to remember no matter which part you're playing, and that is that the whole role of the game is to just have fun. That is the key role of whether you're a player or whether you're the leader, which we call the DM or the dungeon master. That's more of a guiding role of trying to help people play the game correctly or maybe make a play call during the game, but we'll get into that a little bit later. When you're a player, you will be using what's called a character sheet. It looks like this. When you're using the character sheet, it pretty much has everything that you need to know or understand about your character. This is something that you can either do by hand or you can use what's called the D&D Beyond app. That is an application for your phone you can download. It is completely free and you can create up to 6 characters and put them into 6 different games or campaigns with friends. And you can always delete them or edit them later so you never lose your characters. And everything you put in will automatically transfer to this sheet. On a character sheet, you have your stats. That is, you have strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Strength is what it sounds like, how strong your character is. Dexterity is how quickly you can avoid either a trap or a combat or a movement from somebody. The constitution is what's going to help modify how much health you have. Intelligence modifier is going to be obviously how intelligent you are in the game. Your wisdom modifier is a little bit different. Wisdom might have more to do with history checks or understanding a religion or understanding something within the game from the past. And then your charisma is how easily you can talk your way in or out of fights, events, etc. Where do we come up with these numbers? When you play the game, the best way to play it is with a player handbook. With the player handbook, it will teach you that you can either use what's called standard array or you can roll. Rolling is a little bit dangerous because if you roll your dice and you get your stats based off that, some might be very high while some might be very low. Whereas standard array provides you with 6 different numbers and you can choose which stats you want to heighten and which stats you will use as your throwaway statistic. In any case, however you choose to play is completely up to you or your dungeon master, and you guys can decide that on your own. When you're looking at your sheet, the main components you'll be using on a daily basis or during the game is going to all be on the front page. You have saving throws, which means that once you're in a situation where you're in combat or something happens during the game and you have to save your life or save yourself from something, you'll use those modifiers. You also can throw all kinds of cool stuff like anything that your character can do that others might not be able to do, actions you can take during a turn, whether or not you can turn into something else, or spells you can use, or things that affect you that don't affect other people, or even immunities. For example, you might be immune to poison when another character isn't. At the bottom, you'll have your weapons, which shows your modifiers as well. And then on the next page, you'll have a background story of anything you want to talk about for your particular character that you get to create. And then all of your spells, if you're a spellcaster or have the ability to do so, as well as your spell saving throws, etc., meaning if you cast a spell on someone, what they have to roll in order to save from your spell. So that is the character sheet in a nutshell. Again, you can find this PDF blank online and fill it out based off the player handbook, which we'll get to, or you can use the D&D Beyond app, which makes it super simple. You just follow the steps and it will create your character for you, and then you can just print the sheet. This is the main bread and butter of the entire game of Dungeons and Dragons, which again is a tabletop role-playing game. You just play a role. It's all fantasy-based. Anything can happen. Very open-ended. This book is not required to play the game, although it's highly recommended. You can find it sometimes discounted online for $25 or $30, but if you buy it full price at MSRP, it'll cost you about $50. Now, there's a cheap version to play this game, and that is Google. Anything that you Google, if you type in something you needed to know and type in Player Handbook D&D 5e, that means 5th edition, that's what we're currently in on the game, you'll pretty much find the answer to what you need, or you can find a PDF, I'm sure, online, but don't tell anybody I told you that. In this book, and we're not gonna go through it, there's some cool character artwork, of course, in the front, but everything you need to know about the game, choosing a character, choosing a background, choosing a race, choosing a class, which we'll go over those in a second, how to use your different scores and what they're used for, as well as the basics of being a dungeon master are all in here. Most of it's about character creation, and then there's a few tables in here that you would reference while playing the game. Even if you are getting started, I'm sure somebody that you get playing with will have the player handbook that you can borrow and use at your leisure. When you create a character, you create it based off of a race, and you create it based off of a class. So a race would be something like a human, or an elf, or a dwarf. And your class would be a barbarian, something that's really strong and beats stuff up, or a sorcerer that's clearly magical based, or a druid, which is more about caring for the environment and taking care of nature, but also doing that in a magical way. Or almost everyone's pretty much go-to, a bard, something that uses instruments to fight, while also using high charisma to try to get themselves into and out of fights. As you go further into the game and you love it more and more, you can buy a lot more books, which I'll show you later, and all of those almost always have one or two subclasses or additional classes or new races and classes for you to look into, and your DM can purchase that, and you can have access to all of that material through the D&D Beyond app completely free. So that's kind of a hack. Once one person purchases something online on the D&D Beyond app, they can click access and the entire party will get it online for free. So dice is obviously a huge part of a role-playing game that's Dungeons and Dragons. Everybody knows about the D20 or rolling for it or making a roll. So I have kind of a fancy dice tray here with all my extra dice and all that cool stuff, but that's because I've been playing the game a long time and I have my DM stuff, so I'm the dungeon master, which we'll talk about later. In any case, you have 7 dice. So every set of dice is pretty much going to come with these. You have your standard cube dice, which is a 6-sided die, and that's just called a D6. Go figure. D6. You have the go-to. This is the one you'll roll the most. It's a D20, where you have 20-sided die. That's the main die you're going to roll for everything. So if they say, I need you to roll me a dexterity saving throw, which we talked about earlier, well, that means that something's probably happening, a trap, or someone's coming after you. So you would do the roll. I did not roll very well, and that is an 8. And you would go back to your player character sheet that we talked about earlier, and we would look and go, okay, my saving throw for dexterity is a 5. So I take my 8 plus my 5, quick math, that's 13, and I say, okay, DM, I rolled a 13. Is that enough? And they make the determination because it's a fantasy role-playing game. So if they thought that the trap was really pretty easy to avoid, they might say, yes, that passes. Or they might have set the dexterity at 15 and it was super hard to get out of and you didn't pass. Then they will tell you, no, you didn't pass the check, so this is what happens. All of a sudden the floor opens up and you fall into a trap or whatever event that they might create. Again, this is all kind of open-ended and you never know what's gonna happen, which is the fun of the game. You also have a basically 10-sided die that has 5 on the top and 5 on the bottom. It's a D10, go figure. And this one is going to have 100, so it's gonna have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100, which is just double zeros on it. Then you have the other one that's gonna be 10-sided with your single digits, 1 through 9. So you could easily roll something for a D100. You would roll the double digits, so I just rolled 100, that's cool. And then you roll a single one, so it'd be 105. You're also gonna have what's called a D4, go figure, it has 4 sides. You'll roll that for certain things. You have a D12, which is a 12-sided die, of course, and you have your D8, which looks like a little diamond shape. Those are gonna get you through the entire game. I have, again, kind of these fancy metal dice, but you can purchase really cheap plastic die, really simple, at a comic shop or online, and you can kind of change it however you want to. If you're a player it might be fun to buy or purchase a character mini to represent who your character is. There are some that are standard that you can find online. There are really intricate metal ones that you could paint. And there are also websites like heroforge.com where you can actually create a 3D character. They will 3D print it for you, and you can either paint it yourself or have them paint it and send it in. So it can get very expensive, very complicated, or you can just find something you like online and buy it. I would recommend starting off asking your DM for a player that fits what you're looking for, or you can purchase these little, almost like pogs, like little flat pieces of cardboard that tell you what your character is. So if you're a paladin, it just says paladin and it's a little square, and we'll talk about that later. So right now I'm sitting behind what's called a DM screen. Now, you don't have to have this in order to be a DM, but they're usually between $5 and $10, maybe 15 bucks online. I've chosen to purchase the ones specific to a campaign I'm running. Some of them just have dragons on them, or they're just pieces of cardboard. The main purpose for having this is to hide what's going on back here so that you don't give away stuff to your players. Come on back. What I like to have as basics back here is I have my dice so that I can roll for the enemies or for the people that I'm playing. Maybe there's a non-player character and I will roll for them or work that angle in the background. I also typically like to keep little trinkets and things that might come out during the campaign. So for example, I have a little treasure chest here that's just kind of fun, or keys that they might find if they find them to unlock certain things, or cards for certain spells or certain items that I might be having back here, like magic items I'm going to be handing out during the campaign. I also will have all of the cards up here that are basically status cards that are called stat trackers, where in the background I can actually see all the stats about a player, and all they can see is their name. So they know exactly what order they're supposed to go in, but on my end, I actually get to see everything that they can or can't do, so that I can either know that my enemy is going to be able to do certain things against them, or I might be able to give them a little bit of a one-up on certain scenarios depending on how I want the gameplay to flow, that I think is the most fun for the characters. I also keep little miniatures back here that might be coming throughout the campaign. I also have my book, which is always referencing whatever campaign I'm doing. This is actually a campaign put out by D&D. And then I have all sorts of other stuff, like this little bag, which has 3D printed coins that a buddy made for me. And these are called inspiration tokens. And I also have all kinds of spells that would basically be placed on the board, and they're already pre-measured out that I bought online for whatever that spell does, so that everybody knows who's affected and who's not. Plus, I have what are called status rings. So, for example, let's say that someone got hit and got knocked on the ground. We call that prone. I would go right over to here into my status rings, and I would try to find the word prone. So I would pull out my status ring like that, place it on the player so that everybody on the board knows that that character has some kind of effect on them, or something that's causing them either to be able to do something more or an inability to do something else. I keep all of that back here, plus the DM board has all sorts of stuff that I can reference. And then I also always have, as a DM, my player handbook, but also my monster manual, which goes over the basic enemies in the entire D&D world. And I have the Dungeon Master's Guide. The Dungeon Master's Guide has everything from tables on what to do in certain scenarios to suggestions on how to run certain things. For example, let's say you were chasing somebody down and it's a chase scene. How do you run that versus basic hand-to-hand combat? So the DM guide is very helpful if you're a dungeon master. Again, you can purchase these three as a set for I think $100 instead of $150 that it would cost you as individual books. Or you can go the cheap route on Google and find it yourself, or borrow it from a friend through the D&D Beyond app. So thank you for watching this little introduction to D&D with me today. I really enjoyed sharing my hobby with you. In any case, the main goal is to always have fun. If you ever have any questions and you're getting frustrated about trying to play, please reach out to me via a reply email or call me. I'm happy to guide you through it so that you're not frustrated and you're having a good time. And again, I hope you'll enjoy this hobby with me, or that you'll take it on and maybe play it with some friends of your own. I really, really appreciate you joining me today. Again, please reach out, and thanks for watching.